Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Haley always believed she had found the love of her life. And, to be honest, everyone around them thought the same. She and Jason met in college. They were young, dreamy, and in love. The connection between them was instant, the kind you notice just by looking at them. And it was like that from the very first meeting. They started seeing each other every day, sharing not only schoolwork but also plans, fears, dreams, and the feeling that together, they could build anything. The relationship was so intense that, in a short time, they decided to make it official. They chose to get married. It was a decision that seemed rushed to many, since they were very young. But for them, it felt like the most right thing in the world. It was as if nothing or no one could ever get in the way of that love. And indeed, at first, everything seemed perfect. They had that pure, genuine connection, full of complicity. They supported each other in everything. In fact, they even decided to wait until marriage to have their first time, believing it would make everything even more special. Jason had always been a responsible guy. From a very young age, he knew exactly what he wanted from life. While studying, he already worked as a web developer. He was dedicated, hardworking, and determined to build a comfortable life with Haley. He made sure to show her that every single day. He was the kind of man any woman would dream of having. Affectionate, helpful, intelligent, polite, and, above all, in love. Haley, on the other hand, had always been more free-spirited, less focused on work, career, or long-term plans. She never had a steady job. She lived more focused on her personal life, social media, hanging out with friends, following trends, while Jason spent hours on the computer, working on projects, delivering assignments, and looking for ways to improve their lives. And at first, this was never a problem. On the contrary. Jason took pride in being able to take care of Haley, in providing her with a peaceful life, without major worries. They were enough for each other. As long as they were together, everything else seemed unimportant. They would spend hours talking, watching series, going out to dinner, making plans that, little by little, began to lose space to routine. The marriage, which until then seemed like a dream, started to be swallowed by a reality they had never stopped to think about. While Jason dove deeper and deeper into work, trying to offer the best, Haley began to feel that something was missing. That initial euphoria gave way to increasingly similar days. She would wake up, do house chores, check social media, look at the news, make some online purchases, and, in the end, spent most of her time alone, waiting for Jason to come home. She began to notice that her friends were living experiences she had never had. Trips, parties, meetings, adventures, things she, by choice, had set aside to live that love. And, as much as she loved Jason, she could no longer ignore that voice in her head that, day after day, grew louder. A question that bothered her more than anything: did I skip a phase of my life? That began to consume Haley in a way she never imagined possible. She started questioning herself all the time, wondering if she had made the right choices. She began recalling old conversations, advice she had ignored, warnings she had deliberately chosen not to hear. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that, while Jason kept moving forward with his goals, she felt lost. The love that once filled everything now seemed insufficient. No matter how hard she tried to convince herself that this was just a phase, that every couple goes through moments like this, the feeling of emptiness inside her seemed to grow every day. And, to try to keep her mind busy, she started distracting herself with trivial things. She spent more time on her phone, reconnected with people from her past, looked for excuses to leave the house, to feel alive, to do something different from the monotony her routine had become. And it was exactly during one of these distractions that everything started taking a turn she couldn't have imagined, even in her worst nightmares. Amid so many doubts and confusing thoughts, Haley decided to open Instagram and, without even realizing it, started looking at the profiles of people who had been part of her life, people she hadn't seen in a long time. That's how she ended up on Sabrina's profile, an old friend from school she had lost touch with years ago. Out of curiosity, she spent a lot of time there, looking at photos, videos, following every post as if she wanted, in some way, to relive that time when everything seemed simpler. Sabrina was different. More confident, more self-assured, living a life that, in Haley's eyes, seemed much more interesting than the boring routine she was stuck in. She saw pictures of trips, parties, dinners, outings, and that really affected her. Without thinking too much, she reacted to one of the stories. The response came almost instantly, as if that reunion was something both of them had been waiting for a long time. The conversation flowed so naturally that it felt like they had never drifted apart. They exchanged messages for hours, laughed, and reminisced about school stories. And, in the middle of the conversation, Sabrina mentioned she was starting a new relationship with a guy named Tyler. Tyler was the typical man who drew attention. Successful, charismatic, self-assured. It only took Haley a glance at a couple of photos to understand exactly what Sabrina meant when she said he was amazing. And, in a way, that sparked in her a strange mix of curiosity, admiration, and something else she tried desperately to ignore. A few days later, Sabrina invited her for coffee, just to catch up. And Haley, thirsty for anything that could break her routine, accepted immediately. The meeting was light, fun, full of laughter and confessions. During the conversation, Sabrina mentioned that the following weekend she was hosting a barbecue at her house and that Tyler would be there. Haley hesitated for a few seconds but accepted. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. To see people, get distracted, feel alive again. When the day came, she got dressed up like she hadn't in a long time. She looked at herself in the mirror and, for the first time in months, felt beautiful, confident, different from that faded woman she saw every day. And, curiously, Jason wasn't working from home as usual. He had an important delivery for a client and had to spend the entire day out, attending an in-person meeting. This, in a way, made things even easier for Haley, who left the house without needing to give many explanations, simply saying she was meeting a friend she hadn't seen in years. When she arrived at Sabrina's house, she was greeted with a tight hug, full of nostalgia. The atmosphere was light, relaxed, full of laughter. They talked about everything, recalled stories, made jokes, until Tyler arrived. He greeted Haley with that wide smile, a firm gaze, a presence that filled any room. They exchanged a few words at first, but their looks, those spoke much more than any conversation. During the barbecue, the three of them talked a lot, laughed, drank, joked around. But there was something strange, a tension that Haley felt and, at the same time, tried to pretend didn't exist. At one point, Sabrina had to leave urgently. She said a family issue had come up and that she'd be gone for a while, but told them to feel free to stay. And it was there, alone with Tyler, that everything changed. At first, the conversation remained light, relaxed, full of jokes. But little by little, the looks became longer, the smiles more mischievous, the words loaded with double meanings that neither of them bothered to hide anymore. Haley's heart was racing. It was as if she were fighting against something she desperately wanted at the same time. Tyler was confident, self-assured, direct. And that stirred something in her that she hadn't felt in a long time. Her hands trembled, her whole body seemed to burn inside, and, before she realized it, she was already too close to him. A touch on the arm, a more intense look, a silence that said much more than any words. And then, it happened. It was like crossing an invisible line she knew existed but pretended not to see. A kiss that started timidly, almost like a mistake, but quickly turned into something more intense, more urgent. And, in that moment, everything else ceased to exist. Jason, marriage, responsibilities, all of it vanished from her mind. The only thing that mattered at that moment was pleasure, adrenaline, the feeling of being alive. When it ended, she stood there, frozen, staring at her own reflection in the window. A mix of guilt, fear, and, at the same time, a strange satisfaction took over her. For a few minutes, she tried to process what had just happened, but part of her refused to believe it had actually occurred. When Sabrina returned, acting as if nothing had happened, Haley tried with all her might to regain control of her emotions. They continued the barbecue, laughing, talking, discussing random things, but no matter how hard she tried, Haley could barely focus. Her mind was racing, her whole body still seemed to respond to the minutes she had spent there, alone with Tyler. On the outside, she pretended normalcy. Forced smiles, agreed with the conversations, but inside, she was a whirlwind of thoughts that seemed endless. And, perhaps out of fear, or maybe to escape that growing internal conflict, she decided it was time to leave. She got up, thanked Sabrina for the invitation, hugged her sincerely, but when she turned to Tyler, she hesitated. The look they exchanged was quick, almost uncomfortable. She just nodded her head, without the courage to even touch him. She avoided any contact, as if that could somehow erase what they had just done. She left in a hurry, breathing deeply, trying to organize the chaos in her mind. The way back home felt longer than ever. And as soon as she got home, the first thing she did was look at her own reflection in the mirror. She stood there for a few seconds, motionless, observing that woman who no longer seemed the same. She tried, in every way, to understand what she was feeling. If it was regret, or if, in truth, it was something else. A desire she wasn't ready to feel, but that now seemed impossible to ignore. As much as she wanted to lie to herself, the truth was clear, painful, and, at the same time, exciting. Yes, she wanted more. She wanted to relive all of that. She wanted to feel that adrenaline again, that butterflies in her stomach feeling, that fire that seemed to awaken something inside her that had been asleep for a long time. When Jason came home that night, exhausted after a long day of meetings, he found Haley strange, restless, almost avoiding her own gaze. She avoided looking at him, turning her face away every time he tried to start a conversation. When he asked if she wanted to have dinner, she simply replied, in a somewhat hurried tone, that she had eaten something at Sabrina's that didn't sit well and preferred to go straight to bed. She went upstairs to the bedroom almost without waiting for a response, leaving Jason alone in the living room, confused, unable to understand that cold and distant behavior. In the days that followed, Haley tried to pretend that the mistake would be forgotten, that it hadn't changed anything, but it only took a few hours to realize she was lying to herself. And, as if the universe had decided to test her limits, Tyler reached out to her. He sent a message, simple, direct, almost provocative. And deep down, it was exactly what she wanted. From that point on, what was supposed to be just a slip turned into routine. Whenever an opportunity arose, they met. Whether in motels, at his house, or anywhere they could be together, away from prying eyes. The risk, the danger, the secrecy, all of it made it even more addictive. Every time she told Jason she was going out, whether to run errands, visit a friend, or go shopping, in reality, she was going to live this parallel life where she felt desired, alive, powerful. But she realized that, to get more time, she needed a more consistent excuse, something that would justify frequent outings, odd hours, and even the fact that she started dressing up more than usual. That's when the idea of the gym came up. A perfect plan. She told Jason she was determined to change her life, that she wanted to take care of her body, health, and self-esteem. And, of course, he supported her, even feeling happy thinking it would be good for her. Little did he know that those gym clothes, that stronger perfume, and that more elaborate makeup weren't for working out, they were for Tyler. But while Haley was losing herself in this dangerous game, Jason, who wasn't naive, began to notice that something was wrong. She was different. Distant. Cold. Always with her phone in hand, laughing at messages he didn't even know who they were from. Always with a ready excuse. And when she was home, she seemed disconnected, impatient, as if everything about him bothered her. Jason tried to get closer. He asked if everything was okay, if she wanted to talk, if there was anything he could do. But every time he tried, he received vague, disjointed answers, as if the problem was something she herself couldn't explain. She said she was confused, that she needed to rediscover herself, that maybe she had lost herself. She used words that almost seemed rehearsed. And more, Jason was certain that none of it made sense. Tired of the coldness, the distance, he insisted one more time, asking her to be honest, to tell him what was happening, because he couldn't stand living in that uncertainty anymore. That's when Haley, looking directly at him, with a hard expression, said she needed more space. That she felt suffocated. That his way, always wanting to know, asking, caring, was killing her inside. That was a punch to the gut. Jason swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and stayed silent. On the outside, he kept his composure. He just looked at her, shook his head, and went on with his life as if he had accepted it. But inside, it was as if everything had collapsed. At that moment, he understood everything. The pieces fit together in a cruel way. The distance, the excuses, the disdain, it all made sense now. And, without saying a single word about it, something inside him broke in a way that would never be repaired. Jason heard every word of that conversation, absorbed everything, reflected, and did exactly what she asked. He gave her space. But not the way Haley imagined. Without arguing, without yelling, without making a scene, he simply packed his bags and left the house. When she saw him putting his clothes in the suitcase, packing his belongings, she was shocked. She tried to interrupt, asked what he was doing, and, somewhat lost, said it wasn't necessary, that she just wanted some time, but he was already decided. That, for him, was the end. He wouldn't insist, he wouldn't beg. If she needed space, then she would have it, and in abundance. 2 days later, the phone rang. When she answered, it was a lawyer. The serious, formal voice informed her that Jason had filed for divorce. At that moment, the ground beneath her disappeared. Her legs went weak, her chest tightened, her breathing became heavy. She collapsed in tears. None of it made any sense to her. Where had he gotten that idea? Why was he taking everything so seriously? With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and called him. When Jason answered, her voice was pure desperation. She said she was confused, that she had lost her mind, that she had said things without thinking, but that she didn't want it to end. She begged him to come back, to talk, to try to fix things. But on the other end, there was no longer the man who was in love, willing to sacrifice himself to please her. The response came cold, direct, and final. He said he didn't want to anymore. That, for him, it was over. And that, by the way, he had already informed the property manager that she needed to vacate the house by the end of the month because the lease was in his name. After that, he hung up, without even waiting for a response. With no way out, no home, no ground beneath her feet, Haley did the only thing she could at that moment: she moved back in with her mother. A mix of shame, failure, and regret gnawed at her from the inside. And when reality finally hit, when she realized Jason wasn't coming back, she tried to run after the only safe haven she still had in her mind. Tyler. She reached out to him, arranged a meeting, imagining that, at the very least, she could distract herself, ease the pain the way she had been doing before. But this time, it was different. Instead of chemistry, fun, adrenaline, she broke down. She started talking about Jason, how sorry she was, how lost she felt, how she didn't know what to do with her life, how she was afraid of the future, how she felt alone, empty, destroyed. And Tyler, listening to all of this, realized that this wasn't why he was there. He didn't want to be a counselor, he didn't want to listen to complaints, he didn't want to carry that weight. He barely finished listening and already said goodbye. He said he had to go, that he had things to take care of, and, after that day, he simply disappeared. No messages, no calls. As if she had never existed. The divorce went through. She signed the papers with tears in her eyes, completely shattered. Time passed, the days dragged on, and her life remained exactly where it was, stuck. She didn't look for a job, didn't try to reinvent herself, didn't attempt to pick herself up. She stayed there, locked in her own world, living at her mother's house, ruminating over everything she had lost. And as if life wanted to rub the consequences of her choices in her face, one fine day, scrolling through social media, she saw the picture that made her heart drop. Jason, holding hands, smiling, with a beautiful, elegant woman, who, coincidentally, was from the same professional field as him. A light, beautiful relationship, full of harmony. That felt like a knife to her heart. Without thinking, she grabbed her phone and called him. She said she wanted to come back, that she regretted everything, that they could try again, start over, that she now understood everything. But the response was short and cold. Jason simply said no. Time kept passing, and for her, everything remained the same. Living with her mother, no prospects, no motivation, no direction. Meanwhile, Jason kept building his life. He grew, prospered, reinvented himself. And the final blow came days later, when, scrolling through social media again, she saw the photo that tore apart the little dignity she had left. Jason was engaged. A simple caption, but it said it all, ready to start the best chapter of my life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.